at this point, I'm trying to just... what's happening right now in the United States is there's such a bombardment of information and executive orders and a flurry of this. It's hard to keep up with, right? Which is what I feel like they're trying to distract the population from what they're actually trying to do, which is, basically these tech bros want to control us all with AI. I mean, that might sound really insane, but I know it's not going to be right today or tomorrow. All right, hello.
The clue is in the name, pissed off lawyer, how you got into law, because that's a commendable occupation. So if you can give us a bit of background, that'd be great.
Yeah, actually, well, it wasn't a straight path, obviously, so it's kind of like two things that had happened, I would say. I got kicked out at 18 for being gay, so I didn't have a straight path through university like some other people. But once I got to university, I actually was majoring in telecommunications and film, and my original plan was to become a music video director. So you can see that's very different from... Yeah, that would have been fantastic. Sometimes I regret that.
I think you might have got out of that at a good time, though, because not much money in... There used to be loads of money in music videos and all that kind of thing, didn't there? But it's kind of like, since everything went digital, it seems to be not as lucrative in the area.
No, it wouldn't have been, because you wouldn't have gotten all those MTV views, So what happened was the war in Iraq in 2003 started, and it really made me more politically aware. So I switched my major to political science. And from that point forward, and then the second thing that happened was the 2004 election, where George Bush called for an amendment to the Constitution to ban gay marriage, and then 11 states picked up amendments to their state constitutions.
Feels like another world now, going back that far, doesn't it? Feels like a completely different planet.
It's it's hard to even remember that, because it's gay people are so differently viewed now. But back then there was a lot of discrimination, quite like trans people are facing today. So I decided I wanted to go to law school eventually to, help people. I mean, I know that sounds kind of corny, but I figured that's what you do with a political science degree, or to go into politics or run for office or any number of things. So that's what got me into the law, was actually those two historical events. I'd actually add 9/11 into that too, because it pissed me off too.
Well, I mean, I talk about 9/11 as obviously it's one of the most pivotal moments in American history, and I do believe where we are now is directly correlated with that, because when I speak to American people, when I look at their politics, I feel like the whole country is in some kind of post-traumatic shock, like whenever there is, when I visited New York in November, and when you see those, I went to Ground Zero, it's so much part of the identity of New York that it's inescapable. And I think America is, whenever those sirens go off, whenever those, it's very triggering, and I think a lot of people have not got over it, and not been given the adequate tools to deal with it, because when the whole nation is attacked in that way, and it obviously there's lots of details. I don't want to get into all the whole political history of why 9/11 might have happened, but it does seem like not enough care was given to people's mental health as a result of it.
No, back then you didn't really pay attention to mental health like you do now.
No. I mean, I'm not just talking about the servicemen that went out there. I'm not just talking about people that were on the ground, the firefighters. I'm literally talking about the American people, like the people that saw it on TV on a loop. They actually saw people. They actually saw people being murdered in real time, and that was a very new. They may have seen footage from overseas. They may have seen footage of wars in other countries, but to see it on your territory is traumatic. And I don't think, and that's why you had the rise of Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, these kind of figures, because they sort of seemed to know, they seemed to have the answers. They were very powerful speakers, and they wrapped everything up in a rhetoric that sort of, it was like a comfort blanket almost for people that had no idea. They realized that the people in charge had no idea what was going on anymore. So yeah.
Well, that's it. Kind of like propelled me to start going back to college because I dropped out because I got kicked out, right?
Yeah.
And I was 19 when 9/11 happened. I watched it live. I saw the second plane hit live the whole morning.
Mm.
And I'll tell you that my first response is I went to go join the Marines. I wanted to be in the military.
Mm-hmm.
My mom talked me out of that, which is lucky because I would have went to Iraq later. But basically, what happened, I really started the extreme xenophobia in America with like people like Alex Jones and Rush Limbaugh, like you stated. So.
Yeah, I mean, not to go off on too much of a tangent about 9/11, though I do think it's important to talk about in terms of where we are now. But I wanted to just come back to you a little bit to talk about how it feels being a trans man. And talking, because obviously within the conversation about trans people, obviously the focus is primarily on trans women because that seems to be where the most of the demonization comes from. It's not the only, obviously I've seen the horrible things people say about you on social media, but do you feel like sometimes within the community you're not listened to? Because I have felt sometimes like the one thing missing from the conversation is trans men. And one of the reasons I wanted to start this series I'm doing now with you is because I wanted to put that in the centre of the conversation straight away. So do you feel like you are battling on both fronts in a way? Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment. You know, you kind of have a double-edged sword here where, like, people like Brianna Wu, like, she claimed that I have male privilege. Now, so there's some people that will claim that. It's like, well, maybe if I'm just walking around and nobody knows, right? Yeah. But the minute they find out I'm trans, not so much. Then they just see me as some, like, mentally ill woman that, you know, got duped into this. So in the trans community, I do feel like there's not a lot of trans men that speak out. Now, I'm trying to figure out why that is. You know, there's a lot of trans men that go stealth, so I understand that. Mm-hmm. But they need to come a little bit more forward, you know. And I don't know if it's forces within the community keeping them down or not. But I can tell by the reaction I've gotten on Twitter by just speaking out that I can see why some don't.
I think it might just be a numbers game because I don't know why, and I don't know the psychology behind it. But for a long time, the whole conversation when somebody said transgender, the only thing that people would think of was male to female, and I think that's to do with the codification of psychology, and I think it's the way that our lives are pathologized. So women's bodies are policed. And women's bodies are pathologized. But when it comes to the conversation about trans men, I think because it's not a feminization pathway, it's not seen as that threat that it is to the masculine dominant culture, if that makes sense. So it becomes a talking point. Because also, within the culture, it's always been a kind of butt of the joke to be a feminine man or a bit of a... It was always a comedy trope. Going back to like the 50s, well, was it the 40s? You know, the film, the Marilyn Monroe film with Jack Lemmon.
Yes, I know. I don't know the name of it. But...
Oh my God, what is it called? Some Like It Hot. That was it. So it was always part of the culture that being trans or messing with gender for men was a comedy thing, whereas for women, it wasn't. It was seen as impact. Because if you look at do you know the images of Rosie the Riveter and that kind of image? They were celebrated by the government, you know, when it suited them. So these ideas of like powerful women smoking was seen as like some kind of libertarian idea. It's to do with capitalism. It helps the flow of capitalism. The masculinization, whether you see it as masculinization, could be debatable. But that idea that the women can adopt male roles was seen as a net positive when it suited the government to do it or capitalism to do it. But obviously we see the image of Rosie the Riveter quickly turn into the 1950s housewife again after the war. So, you know, there's a lot of contradictions there. So, yeah, I know that was a bit of a waffle, but yeah.
No, it's true. Everything you said is true. I mean, like, and I also, what I've gathered from, you know, TERFs and everything, some of the things they say to me, it's like, well, you're not a threat to men in the same way that trans women are a threat to women. And also the second point I would make is that you're right when you say that being feminine in the culture is seen as negative, right? I mean, a lot of insults are like, you throw like a girl, for example, just to use a simple one.
Well, every trans woman knows, every trans person knows that they will always get hit with the opposite. So when I was a young boy, when I was perceived to be male, the insult would be, why are you acting like a woman? What, stop being a big girl, stop being a sissy boy, stop being a Nancy. As soon as I adopted that as my identity, it's like, you're a man. What are you doing? Stop being a...
Same thing.
So it's like, it's not even the gender thing that it's to do with. They want to control the narrative. The person that is bullying or wants to control will try. It's like, I'm going to put you in your place. You are what I say you are, not what you self-actualize to be. I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, I got the same thing, right? When I walked the earth as a butch lesbian, people would call me a man all the time.
Yeah.
Or use male insults or an insult to her. Now I'm called a woman. It's hilarious if you ask me, the double like way that happens. It's like, well, pick one. Which one am I then? This brings me into my next kind of thing, because I wanted to talk about, because obviously I've followed you quite a while now on Twitter and X, and you've observed, as I have, the slow kind of incremental decline of moderation, of and the boosting of the far right, and obviously Elon Musk takeover. I was wondering, how do you cope with? Because I cannot cope with that anymore. I've had to remove myself from social media just to concentrate on my real life. Obviously, I do this, and this is what I enjoy doing, because I can talk to somebody one-to-one and we can have a proper conversation. But actually, I don't feel like social media is beneficial, and I have criticised people around me. I think I might have said something to you about, why don't you just come off? But I understand why you stay on, because that is your activism. But I was how do you cope with all this stuff? Because it is nasty. It is like pretty low bar what people are sending you and doing to you. It's kind of like a trauma response. Okay, so like I do suffer from CPTSD, and one of the pillars of that is homophobia, like almost 30 years of it, right? And I dealt with such extremities, not so much with the social media though, but just like extremities with violence and slurs and this and that. I mean, that I kind of have an endless threshold for trauma, which is, I'm not saying it's healthy, but I'm very desensitized to a lot of those things. So I just try to take it in stride, and like, I know people are going to hate me. And, I can't say that sometimes it doesn't get to me. When you get a J.K. Rowling pile-on, it's going to get to you.
Yeah, I mean, you've had quite a lot of attention from, like, well, I don't want to dwell too much on J.K. Rowling. I'm sure she's going to come up quite a few times in this podcast. But, well, I'm trying to avoid dwelling on individuals, but I will say, when somebody like that does retweet you, they know what they're doing. They know by exposing you to their followers. I mean, it's said that, how many million followers does Jacob? It's like several million.
14.
But when I've actually looked at the analytics, it's always the same 500 people. There's like not... The most active users are all transphobic. So she knows exactly what she's doing when she does that. So, I mean, do you feel like you're obligated to respond to that? Or is it useful? Because I would have thought sometimes that kind of exposure can work in your favour, because it does expose the hate that is around. It's a bit like a shit magnet. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, we had like a 6-month exchange, J.K. Rowling and I, between her sharing my stuff and then us in the comment sections before she blocked me. And I thought it exposed the hate. Like, some of it just stood on its own. People can look at it, or I would share it, and it shows just how off the deep end she went. It also gave me way more followers and stuff like that. Yeah. So I can't say it was completely negative. But, and I don't want to dwell on her as an individual either. I'm just saying, like, let's use an example of getting a pile on, or when she shares me, then their flying monkeys are going to come and bombard me. So that can be a bit much.
Well, one of the reasons I'm not on Twitter is because, I had quite a big account for a while, which I built up. I was quite proud of the fact that I built it up without boosting it artificially, like a lot of people do. And I said the wrong thing. I was just really angry one day, and I think I said, I won't say, I think I said, you should just delete yourself, you cis bitch. and obviously that was seen as a death threat. And I was like, this is not a death threat. This is just me being angry. And I think the use and the censorship of the word cis, I mean, that's just so petty and childish, and exposes Musk as this, like, you know, he thinks himself as this free speech maverick, but he just prefers, he's been able to boost the people he prefers. That brings us up, probably up to date to where we are now, because I think this election was rigged digitally. You know, he might not have done anything and tampered with any ballot boxes, but if you can weaponize enough data and boost enough people and collaborate with people who have millions and millions of followers, then that is rigging. It is like weaponizing the media, because you're suppressing science, you're suppressing real politics, you're suppressing dissident voices in favor of people that agree with you. That's it. That's what he's doing.
If I didn't know any better, let's say I was just an average voter and I was on X, right? I would think that the world was crumbling because of Biden. Yeah. And Harris, and that's what I would see, right? But, it's similar to Fox News.
I mean, to be honest, I thought the world was crumbling. When I saw Biden, I was really scared, you know, because we were all. I think there was a sort of collective denial from the left, you know, about Biden and Harris. I mean, when I was in New York and I saw those shops with all the Trump merchandise, there was hardly any Camilla merchandise, and unfortunately we live in a world of sloganeering, merchandising, sound bites, easy to digest messages that make us feel good, messages that have some kind of inner kind of, those are the bad guys, we are the good guys kind of messaging. Camilla can't do that because, one, she's a decent person. She knows she's not running just a marketing campaign. But the problem is, most of the people who vote don't vote based on policy. They just want to win. And it was this idea, we want to win, and we'll win at any cost. Even at our own personal cost, we will win. Because what matters more to Trump supporters than anything else is getting one over on the libs as they see it, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you're right about, like, the slogans and the spite size, you know, MAGA, Make America Great. It isn't even his original slogan. Reagan said that in the 80s.
Oh, yeah, but that slogan goes back years, you know.
Yeah, I've heard it before. So, you know, but he took it and he marketed it well, and he's got that red hat, and everyone's, you know, this is something very recognizable.
It's very powerful, and you can't discount that. I think what it is, it's just said, because Trump to me represents some kind of oligarchical kind of what's the word? It's almost like a religious kind of thing. It's like Superman is coming. Americans believe in this thing of like being saved and being redemption and all this, and they invest so much in him to the point where he becomes too big to fail. So all the billionaires, all the tech oligarchs, whatever you want to call them, are invested in. Well, he can't fail now, because like any project they plough money into, any investment, which is what he is, he can't fail now, because if he fails now, they lose everything. So it's not. It stops being about politics, and it becomes about this maniacal figure who, you know, and I. You know, we can make comparisons to the 1930s and talk about fascism, but I reject that, because back then we didn't. I believe that the fascists believed they believed in what they believed in, even though it was bad. I don't think Trump believes in anything. I think he believes in winning and getting one over on his enemies. That's about it.
Oh, yeah. It's revenge. It's revenge for the 2020 election. It's revenge for his prosecutions. It's revenge for a bunch of things. I honestly think if he weren't prosecuted, he maybe wouldn't have won the election. And it's backwards, right? He got prosecuted for literal crimes, and it made his support harden. That's a phenomenon I don't think I've seen before in American politics. So
just to add to that, I was going to say what I can see is sort of the end of neoliberalism. The idea of the sovereign individual, it's really weird in a way, because it goes back to those ideas of Ayn Rand and conquest of the individual, and you know, the person, the individual is more important than anything else. It's like anti-collectivism. But Trump is all about collectivism. Trump is all about this, you know, unity, and it just feels like that. But it's obviously in a negative way. It is very anti-neoliberal,
Oh yeah, neoliberalism is dead right now.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah.
I mean, and that started in the '90s with the Clintons, in my opinion. I mean, it probably started before then, but that was really neoliberalism was really brought into the forefront by the 8 years of the Clinton presidency.
I just picked up Byline Times this week, and it's all. I mean, it's really interesting because I get the British perspective on American politics. And British politics, honestly, some British pundits, they're so holier than thou, and they look down on America, and they think, oh wait, Americans just idiots, basically. And that's got them into a lot of fucking trouble now, because you'll see these podcasts. I don't know if you've heard of The Rest Is Politics and the news agents.
No.
People and they just sit across each other guffawing about how America is falling apart, and as though it's some kind of hilarious thing, and I just find the whole thing disturbing because, obviously we might as well, we are connected umbilically to America, whether we like it or not in England.
Yep.
There's always those Americans that they put on the telly. Do you know what I mean? Like the comedy Americans. Like, I ain't voting for no goddamn lady. Those kind of people. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, they put the idiots on.
They always put the maniacal, obsessive Americans on the news to show this is what's happening in America. But actually, it's the middle that fell through. It's the middle that fell. Like, you can always have maniacs on either side of politics, but as long as the people in the middle keep them regulated, then things tended to be okay. But there's no middle. There's no middle anymore. They're all like, it's not that they've gone to each side. It's just disappeared. They're like, they can't be bothered. They just don't. They're so apathetic. And
it's true to say, when I studied revolutions in college, right? And the main thing that's true across any political spectrum of revolutions is when the middle falls out, there's no buffer between the rich and the poor any longer. And that's a lot of times when revolutions occur, or maybe a revolution might look different now in the 21st century, but you know what I mean? Like, there's no more middle ground. There's no buffer between the top and the bottom. And so that's it.
Yeah. So I mean, just to bring it back into our lives, because like for us, I mean, we didn't want to have this argument with Republicans. We didn't want to have this argument with people in the media about being transgender. They brought it to us, and it became political. It became politically expedient for them to do so because it mirrors the anti-abortion campaign. It's something that plays well in talk radio talking points and people that ring in angrily. I don't know what's going on with the world. I hate the world. Everything's gone wrong since COVID. It must be the trans people's fault. You know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah, well, I would bring it back to when Oberga fell and marriage equality in 2015. Now, I've studied the Supreme Court and, obviously very deeply. When you have, like, Roe v. Wade, for example, people spent 50 years fighting against that to get overturned. They didn't forget that abortion was legal. So gay marriage, same thing. Do you think those people 10 years ago just forgot about it? No, they've been fighting against anything queer since then.
Yeah, I mean, I see, from my point of view, we've seen the Americanization of British politics, and what I mean is, like, it's mainly through the media, because we have, like, GBnews, and we have, like, that's a very Fox News emulation, and it's like it's always poking people rather than educate people. Bring a subject to the table. Let's talk about this. Let's bring an expert on. Let's talk. It's like, no, this is the threat. This is the thing you've got to be frightened of. This is the thing that's coming over the horizon that's going to destroy your way of life. Do you know what I mean? There's trans people coming over on small boats to take your jobs and rape your women. It's like we've heard it all the way back into the history of whenever. And also, I think it's a bit rich of us sometimes, as especially me. I admit. I mean, I wasn't very political until it started to affect me directly. I totally admit that. I didn't talk about social issues much because they didn't affect me directly. But I had to unlearn a lot of misogyny. I had to unlearn a lot of bullshit. And the reason I'm sat here talking to you now is because I went through that process of unlearning misogyny and unlearning racism. And when I didn't think I was racist. But when I think about the way I ignored things, the way I give things a free pass, the people I would allow to speak, on my behalf, yeah, that's racism. And I only see that now because I see people doing it with trans people. Now you could say, oh, that's really sad, Freda. Why did you notice? So because that society isn't set up to educate me. I had to do it myself.
Oh. Yeah, you have to unlearn it, and people are lazy. A lot of people are too lazy to do that work, or they don't like looking within. I mean, there's that, right? People have their way of being, and they don't want to rock the boat of their existence by admitting, hey, look, maybe I hold these racist beliefs. They don't want to do that.
I mean, when the top tier of government now is openly doing Sieg Heil, and then denying it. I did actually want to talk about this. I just want to talk about Elon Musk for a minute, because what I noticed was when he did that, there was this sort of collective intake of breath, wasn't there? There was a kind of, oh my God, did he just do that? Because I was watching, Asan on YouTube. He does Asan, I forgot his surname, Piker.
Yeah, Piker. Yeah, I like him.
But you could see his face, like he was doing this live stream, and it was like everything just stopped. It was like the world paused, and then the whole memory, the genetic traumatic memory of the 20th century came through his mind. But then what I noticed was everybody, all the Trump people, they were like trying to find images of the Pope doing a wave, of Kamala doing a wave, of Biden almost to say, oh God, of course he's not a Nazi. But that's not why they think he's a Nazi. It's because he's actively promoting people. There was a news article today, I'm going to try and find that, where he's literally he's actually known to have been helping to monetize people on a terrorist watch list. That's how crazy.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I think you sent me that, actually.
He's taking payments. Mm-hmm. He's taking payments from people who are. I'll just put the article up now because it's on the BBC News. So if you want to find it, it's there. But I don't want to dwell too much about that. It's just something I thought was important to mention, because it's not the fact that he did that, because he could say, oh, well, I'm just autistic and all that. It's like, I know autistic people. They're not Nazis. You know what I mean? So that's no excuse.
Right. And he did it twice. Now, here's the thing. You can collect all the pictures of people waving and making, but he didn't just wave. He hit his chest and went outwards twice. And that's a Nazi salute. Like, my first reaction as a Romani person was like, that's terrifying.
Well, that reminded me of, have you seen American History X?
Oh, yes, I love that movie.
There's a bit
it's terrifying, but I love it.
Yeah, but you see, American History X, this is why I'm very careful, like, when I talk to people about fascism and stuff like that, because we are living in a different world, and it's not because we've lived through so much marketing and advertising and diminishing of the idea that, that things mean anything. And it's like, to the point where symbolism, things that are definitely associated with Nazism, can be repurposed and made into comedy. And that is something, because if you look at things like the Babylon Bee and those kind of, they use comedy, they think they're being, but actually what they're doing is sucking up to power, and that's not what comedy is supposed to do, right? Comedy is supposed, or satire at least, is supposed to attack that which is in control. So I think it's difficult to talk about this in terms of what Elon Musk is doing, because it could easily just be passed off as, oh, he's just trolling, because everything is trolling now. You know what I mean? That's how it feels.
Oh yeah, it's saying, I'm just trolling, or I'm an edgelord, or whatever term you want to use for those people, right? And people have become really desensitized, I feel, because of trolling, or 4chan, or Kiwi Farms, or any of those types of things. Well,
another thing I want to talk, because I've got the Daily Mail today. Well, it's my mum's day. I don't buy it. My mum buys it. She gives it me. But they're talking, because they use the main thrust now of the I wouldn't say far right, ultra conservatives now. They want to get rid of Keir Starmer, and they're kind of using Trump's election to do it, because there has been, I don't know if you've seen, but we've some of our leading politicians, David Lammy, Angela Rayner, they have been seen to slag off Trump in the past and call him a fascist or call him a misogynist, because this was like a few years back when he was on trial for rape. Right? That's why they were saying these things. Not because they didn't like him or were smearing him. It's because he was on trial for sex crimes and he was sleeping with hookers and paying them off. This is all proven, right? So
Right.
when they bring this up now, they'll say, oh, well, the Labour government needs to kowtow to Trump now. They have to bow down to him. Instead of standing up to what is obviously bullshit,
You're a sovereign nation.
Andrew Neil in the Daily Mail is basically saying, I think we should. I think it's going to be a world of pain for Labour, but that's his way of saying this is okay. It's okay to attack Starmer based on this, and they've been trying to do this for a while anyway. Any time there's a terrorist incident, any time there's a stabbing, any time there's a crime, they link it to Labour's weakness and nothing else. Even though the Tory party was in power for 15 years and things were getting incrementally worse then. Anyway, sorry.
And Labour hasn't been in power that long. And it's like, it could be, it's the same thing. Like if they were in power for 15 years, the Tories, it could still be residuals of that. We don't know that. Keir Starmer hasn't been in power that long. Like, how can you blame everything in the world on him? But, and I've seen Elon Musk's campaign to try to get rid of him in terms of blaming him on, like, rape gangs and, like, really powerful emotive things, right?
Yeah, because these are things that pull at people's, worst parts of their character. It, like, makes them hate, and it gives them justification for racism. I mean, there's this thing I've been following where the women are organising this thing called the Million Women March, and it's like it's to campaign for an inquiry into this rape gangs thing. But the whole rape gangs narrative has been so much adopted by the far right that there'll never be any justice there. That was one of the reasons Tommy Robinson he was interfering in the trials of people that were up for sex crimes, these horrible things that were happening to children. And he was interfering, and he scuppered justice. He didn't help anyone, but he likes to tell people he was the person that uncovered all this. You know what I mean? It's not, and unfortunately, those women that are being radicalised through that are the same women that have become radicalised through the anti-trans movement. Because for me, they're the feminists that the patriarchy is. They prefer them because they don't challenge any kind of power structures. They just attack, what they're emotionally driven, or it almost feels like there is no they're not helping any vulnerable women or disenfranchised women, are they, by doing that?
No, not at all. Not at all. Especially the whole prison argument where, like, I work in prisons. I don't see any TERFs there helping the women in prisons that I visit. They're just a bunch full of hot air on social media, but they're, like you said, they're using emotive things. They're using things that tug at your heartstrings, that are easy to understand, and that pull at your worst instincts of hate. It's easy to I think hatred's easy to tap into.
Well, yeah. I mean, they do often say that, the way that they attack us sometimes, they think the trans movement is some kind of bourgeois movement. It's like a middle class thing. Oh, look at the celebrities in Hollywood. Why are all the children trans and all this nonsense? But actually, within Rowling's group of, her inner circle, you could say, they're all middle class, well-to-do, well-heeled women. They're not people that they may have done some good work. I'm not discounting anything they might have done in the past, by funding charities and stuff like that. But throwing money at things is not necessarily being a feminist. It just means that you've got, you can back causes. I mean, like, it isn't going to help any women escaping domestic violence on the street, is it? You know what I mean? It's like they don't live in that world.
Yeah, these women trying to escape domestic violence aren't thinking about whether a trans woman's in their shelter or not. They're just trying to get away and get out of their scenario.
I've been looking
at what I'm saying?
I've been looking at J.K. Rowling's. She had that book come out, The Woman Who Wouldn't Wished.
Yeah, I'm sitting right next to it.
Yeah, you read it. Well, basically, it's like I called it J.K. Rowling's My Struggle. Because it's definitely got this kind of weird hero's journey about it, and it feels to me as if they're trying to say, we have battled, we've been in the trenches, and we've been fighting against gender ideology, and it's like, no, all you've done is messed and destroyed Scottish politics by interfering with the democratic process. Because I'm talking about the self-ID laws here that were voted in by a huge majority, and after all the lobbying and all the work they did to try to get things to go their way. It didn't work, So it only worked. The only reason there's no self-ID in Scotland is because the Westminster government overturned it. So
yeah, and she compared herself. I read just Rowling's essay so far, and I need to read more of the book. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to pick ones out that I feel like are necessary.
I've just got an article up at the moment that I wrote that does examine the book.
Okay, yeah, I think I've read it before I got the book. Like when you wrote it was last year, right?
Yeah. I just looked at this picture of the women that were involved in the book, and it's what I call a very Caucasian occasion.
Yeah, very Caucasian. And Rowling's title for her article is about witch burning, which is when I wrote an article about the book, about her article, I essentially said that's right away going to you're being victimized, right? You're being victimized by gender ideology. You're being victimized by this. You're being burned at the stake in a metaphorical way.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it.
Where I'm like, no, you're just amassing more power, right? They're amassing more power. They're not being burned at the stake, and none of them are anything like witches that were burned at the stake.
Yeah,
nothing like that.
If you wanted to describe a moral panic where there was a witch hunt, where there were people told there's a certain section of society that are a threat to you, and you have to go and seek them out, and you have to ask them what they are, and if they can't answer what they are, we will punish them. What does that remind you of? It's like when I have been in these debates with people that say, well, what is a woman? What is a trans woman? It is like a witch trial, because on one hand I can say, well, is there one definition of a woman, do we say? And then you say, you see, you're messing with semantics. And if you say, well, yeah, I identify as a woman, how dare you co-opt the space of a woman? And then if you say, well, I just identify as non-binary, there's no such thing as non-binary. It's like everything you say, they have a response for that frames you as the problem, and that is a witch trial. That is what a witch trial is. And then
it's like the Spanish Inquisition,
yeah. But you see, what people forget, and I don't know if it's true for trans men, it's like I don't necessarily adopt that idea of being a woman. It already exists in society. Like I said, when I was younger, people would call me though as a pejorative. I knew this thing existed. I knew what it was. I knew these parameters. I knew what was affirmed or denied. And it was like, well, the best way I feel comfortable is by adopting this paradigm that I don't really invent, but it sort of helps me navigate the world. So I'm not just co-opting something, am I?
No, you're not. It's as a trans man, I was always masculine to begin with. So for me, it's like that. But do I see myself as an equal to a cis man in terms of we're the same? No, I don't. And I have no interest in being a cis man. I'm not one. So, I think that's where a lot of people get that wrong. They think that I'm wanting to be that. And then they'll be like, you still look like a woman, which I disagree with. But even if I did, I don't care.
I think this idea of looking like something is interesting because I don't really care about passing, and I suppose I can assimilate, but my whole point of being a protest and being and talking about these issues is, yes, I am visible. I think that's why it's difficult for people like Brianna Wu, because on one hand she wants to say, oh no, I'm a nice conservative trans woman, I'm no problem to anyone, I accept that there are some arguments they want to have, but she is just by being the person she is visible. And unfortunately, for the extreme MAGA people, for the extremists, they see her in the same way as they would any trans person who doesn't fit into society. It's like Blair White isn't going to be spared by people that go, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and then it's God's given way. You know what I mean? They're not going to change.
Just like they didn't spare, Jewish people in the Holocaust, there were some that became collaborators, right? That thought the same thing, that the leopards wouldn't eat their face. And in fact, that was untrue.
Yeah.
So you have, go ahead.
I was going to say, this whole thing about fascism and Nazism, it's like, it's hard to talk about in a modern context because everything is sort of trolling now. So what Musk was doing, he could just say, I'm just trolling you, I'm just having a laugh, but actually, have we forgot? I think there's this collective memory that we have that is fading. I don't think I don't think trauma memories last forever. They are generational. And I think we're reaching a generation now that has forgotten the Second World War. Not because they can't pick up a book or because they can't read it on the internet. It's because the generational trauma, the inbuilt...
Well, they weren't raised by that generation, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like, my grandfather fought in World War II. My uncles fought in World War II. Like, I'm old enough.
Yeah, yeah.
I was taught about the Holocaust from being Romani, but I don't feel like these kids, they're kind of far removed from it.
Yeah, I just feel like this new generation, if they're going to be educated by Trump's version of TikTok, which is frightening. I mean, TikTok was frightening enough for a start. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a huge user, but
you know, I just find it really worrying that there needs to be government intervention. Unfortunately, when people reject the idea of government interfering in our lives and educating our children, telling us what we should be learning, but actually it's not the government. It's just that some people study these things. Some people understand these things better than you. And it's that idea, because there was this idea that, the experts, what do they know? Experts, they're just, we don't need experts. Well, yeah, actually, you fucking do need experts, especially experts in history and science and art, maybe. Do you know?
Well, what's interesting is I'm reading a book called The Strategists right now, and it's about Hitler, Mussolini, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. And it's a big volume, but it gets into their psychology of before World War II and then it'll get into after. But my whole point with that was that, the psychology of these people that started fascism, well, Mussolini in particular, it all came out of the horrible events of World War I. Now, I had a point, and I can't remember what the point I wanted to make.
Don't worry.
What were you...
I mean, I just go off on
You might want to
tangents.
edit that one out.
It's okay, don't worry about it. I just go off on mad tangents anyway. But I think the overarching theme is how crazy and how normalized these things, this nasty version of social media has become. I remember. I mean, I'm going to sound really old now, but when I first got on the internet, my dad was really into computers. And he had an interest in computers that was beyond most people's. So we had the internet in our house when there was nobody else on there to talk to but other people who was into computers. Do you know what I mean? So I just remember this moment. I can't remember when it was exactly. It happened over one summer in like 1996 or 7. I must have been really like in my late teens. And I just remember, who are these people getting on the internet? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I was on the internet in 91 on Prodigy.
Wow.
My dad got... Yeah, so I was a really early user of...
Well, that's even earlier than me then. But what I'm saying is there was this influx of people that you think, right, yeah, no, I've seen that. We're past that bit. You don't need to keep going. And it's like you have to keep reiterating things because there are newer people coming online. And I think the turning point really for me was Facebook. Because I'd had MySpace and I thought that was a bit shit. But Facebook was the time when I thought it stripped me of my personality, because now the site is telling me how to use it. Now the technology is telling me how to be around it. Whereas you just built your own things. Like even on MySpace, you could build your own front page.
Yeah, HTML. That's how I learned some of that.
Yeah. So...
Oh, by the way, I wanted to circle back to your point about experts and anti-intellectualism before I move on, because I remember my point, which was that the communists, when the Bolshevik Revolution occurred, right, the very first thing that they got rid of was experts. Yeah. Like, so some of these people don't remember that or don't know that. Like, they got rid of experts and they wanted party loyalty versus being an expert, because expertise was viewed as bourgeoisie. Yeah. And so they wanted party loyalists, which is very similar to what's happening in MAGA and our government now, wanting to fire experts and put in party loyalists. That was my entire point.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is the whole idea of controlling, because obviously social media is so powerful and they want to diminish... I mean, I don't know if they want to diminish every dissonant voice, because then who are they talking to? But I just think they want to control what is popular on social media. So the first time I started to notice was through sites like, have you heard of Culture Critic?
I have not. No.
And it's like, and what they do, they show like Roman architecture and paintings from the Renaissance, and they'll say, why can't we be like this now? Like, why isn't the world like? And the whole premise of the thing is modern art is rubbish. Like, all contemporary art is just degenerates, basically. And
I've seen other sites like that, or other
obviously
posts like
that goes back to the idea of. The degenerate art thing came out of the because the Nazis basically fetishized powerful Roman, built. But you could say everybody did that, because if you look at banks, I'm trying to find the Culture Critic account while I'm typing. If you look at banks, they're all built in the shapes of Greek temples, aren't they? They all have the Corinthian columns, Doric arches, all that kind of thing. That's where it comes from. And it's to do so if you need a bank building, how do we convey power? We invoke Greece and Rome. So
if you go to Washington D.C. ever, that's what you're gonna see: the Capitol building, the White House. That's the Supreme Court. They all have that architecture.
Yeah. So if you look at the way that they did, look at the New York Stock Exchange. It's basically a Greek temple, isn't it, at the outside? Mm-hmm. But just behind there, there's nothing. It's just a facade.
Did you go to the stock exchange or pass by it?
Yeah. I did go.
Oh, nice.
I went on the Wall Street tour. It was called the Financial Crisis Tour, and that was quite ironic because it was $50. So I had my own.
Go figure.
I had my own little financial crisis after that, but anyway, it was interesting because. I mean, they were talking about the 1920s, and then they right up until the 2008 crash and the Lehman Brothers. That was a direct result of 9/11. That's right.
Yeah, I remember exactly where I was when I heard the banks crashed. I was in my first year of law school, right? And I came home from class and I turned on CNN as usual because I'm a news junkie. And I just saw Lehman Brothers failing and all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, fuck. And then I graduated into a recession. So, that was a crazy time, too. And it was a direct result of 9/11. And then you had all this predatory lending, and it was crazy.
Yeah. I was going to ask now, so is there anything you wanted to talk about that I've not hit on? Because I've just gone through my bullet points. I think we've covered quite a lot. Is there anything you wanted to bring up, like you've been thinking about recently, or...?
Well, I'm more, at this point, I'm trying to just... what's happening right now in the United States is there's such a bombardment of information and executive orders and a flurry of this. It's hard to keep up with, right? Which is what I feel like they're trying to distract the population from what they're actually trying to do, which is, basically these tech bros want to control us all with AI. I mean, that might sound really insane, but I know it's not going to be right today or tomorrow, but down the line, just distract the population, keep us fat and happy. That's what I always say. Americans are, I said when I was 18, we're going to become fat and distracted. Not to be fat phobic. I'm just saying, well fed.
I know what you mean. It's the bread and circuses
yes.
thing, yeah.
So that's what's happening. We've become too fat and distracted, or well fed and distracted, to use a better term. And people don't really care. They don't want to get involved, and it's quite terrifying. And I'm watching it happen, and I'm not sure. I can't give any predictions for the future. There was a senator or a congressperson, I want to say, that introduced a bill to try to override the amendment that limits the president's terms to 2, so Trump could run in 2028, right. Which isn't going to happen. But it's just it's a circus over here right now.
Yeah, I mean
it's crazy.
It's the same here. I think that the thrust is towards it is a sort of end of neoliberalism and a kind of a popular. It's an ultra popularism, and I don't see any kind of value in anything that we have got Nigel Farage over here is sort of positioning himself as a populist leader. But what do they actually bring to the table? What is their policy? Because nobody talked about policy really with Trump. It was always vague ideas of making America great again, and then these kind of, we're going to ban this, we're going to stop that, we're going to, and the biggest problem, the most important thing at the moment now for me is watching what is happening with the immigration laws. Because they'll always start off incrementally by saying we want to get rid of the criminals, we want to get rid of people that are illegals. They call them illegals, don't they?
Yeah, same here, illegals.
But we know that that's not where they will stop if they could.
Yeah, right now it's a hard time to be an immigrant or a trans person because we're low-hanging fruit, right?
Mm-hmm. And at the
time,
I just worry about what would happen if, say if this country was to fall to the right in the way that America has. Because, I mean, it is easy. It is because I always say there's only like 3 or 4 incremental steps, to fascism, and that's dangerous.
And we can't forget Hitler did it constitutionally.
Yeah.
He did it within the framework of the law. He came to power and he was appointed chancellor through legal means. And then the Reichstag fire, this is what we need to watch out for, is some type of huge event that gives the government power to revoke freedom. And I'm just waiting for that kind of Reichstag fire moment here. I'm sure it'll come. Because Trump has talked about it, the Insurrectionist Act, and invoking this, and martial law, and all of this other crap.
See, in some ways, because I hate neoliberalism so much, and I hate the whole way things were just plodding on, and everybody was pretending everything was okay in Gaza, and everything was okay, and well, not okay, but we're just going to plod along. We're just going to keep ploughing money into things, and I think I am a disruptor. And the thing I like about Trump, ironically, after all I've said today, is that he's a disruptor, and sometimes, unfortunately, to wake people up out of apathy, you need a disruptor. And I'm not saying that I want this to happen or anything bad to happen, but as things were going, they weren't good. You know what I mean? Kamala wasn't the answer.
They weren't.
Kamala wasn't the answer to anything, and anybody that thinks so is kidding themselves. It's like
she was not the answer.
The whole thing with Pride and Pride marches and things like that, I was totally critical of those because I hate the way they're co-opted by commercial interests. There was a movement in Manchester called Take Back Pride, and the idea was that, look, we need to be community-based. We need to talk to people on a community level, not get Coca-Cola to come and sponsor a massive event that anybody can attend in the city centre. That's not what Pride marches are about. And having a march through the city is not enough. I'll tell you, we just had in America. Are you familiar with the store Target, or do you have any of those over there? Well, we have a similar thing. We've got like big superstores that sell clothes and all sorts of haberdashery.
Well, Target was very big on selling, like, during Pride Month, like, Pride merchandise, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then last year there was a controversy where the right came after them, and then they, like, scaled back on it. But just today I saw the news where Target's now the next company in America to get rid of DEI policies.
Oh.
And it's just like, so that you can't trust corporate pride. They're going to do, when it's cool to be supporting a pride, they're going to do it for their bottom line. It comes down to who the managers are. It comes down to that one person to sign off on something, and if that person is, not on our side, or doesn't see the value in inclusivity, or doesn't see the value in diversity, and these things like, oh, it's such a liberal lefty idea. Diversity. We live in diversity. It's not something we invented. We live in a diverse country. We live in a diverse world. If you want to narrow yourself down to things, then create your own target. Make a Nazi target. I don't know. They have to change the world so much to get what they want, and they have to narrow things down. It's not the left dictating terms. It's not me saying, oh, as a trans person, I demand this. It's just saying, well, legally, you're going to have to deal with me. That's it, Yeah, on a legal standpoint, you're going to have to deal with trans people. You're going to have to deal with things you don't like. I deal with things I don't like. Particularly, I don't like religion, but I still believe that everyone has the right to practice. You know what I mean? And I wish the other side saw it the same. Like, we can stay here's the thing. I don't need to be liked or accepted by these people. I think that's what their misunderstanding is. I don't really care. All I want you to do is leave me alone, and I want the law to not reflect religion.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think that's not a lot to ask for.
I mean, there are a lot of religious people who misinterpret, the Constitution, because there is the separation of church and state. Although I would say, I did want to talk about, actually, and I forgot, the priest, the bishop in what the church, I forgot the chapel in, was it a chapel or, I don't know, a cathedral?
It was the Episcopal, it's an Episcopalian church, but I can't remember its name.
Yeah, but what she said was absolutely, it was so weird to hear as well, because I'm just going to find the thing so I can put it up on the screen, actually, then I can talk about it. There she is. Reverend Marianne Edgar Bood, I think that's the name. And,
yeah, that's her.
And what it was, what she said was just so ordinary, really. It wasn't anything particularly controversial. It was just be nice to people, you bastards.
Yeah, she said it in so many terms, right? Yeah, and she was teaching Christian principles.
Yeah. And I think what she said was really important. And I think it was like a breath of fresh air, like I say. And unfortunately, that message will be suppressed and buried under Musk's Sieg Heil. That's what will happen, because both those stories are they're social media hot. You know what I mean? One of them will not be boosted, and we know which one. And if it is boosted, it will be in the direction of demonizing the bishop, as we've seen.
I got almost 400,000 views on that. I got almost 400,000 views on that video of her saying that. So, but and over 1,000 comments. And I think I didn't read 1,000 comments, but I got a lot of pushback on it. So, a lot of it was negative.
I just wanted to say thanks for doing it, because I did want you to be the first person I interview in this new series I'm doing, because of all the people that I've spoken to and all the people I've got to know over the last couple of years, I think you've been the most resilient online, and you're always bang on. Like I know you do lose your temper sometimes, but when you're talking to people, you are always quite focused, and I don't know how you manage that. So I just want to thank you for putting yourself out there and putting yourself in a line of fire, because I understand why a lot of people don't, and I understand why I had to come away from it. So I just wanted to thank you for your activism.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
No, it's great. Nice. It's just absolutely brilliant what you do, and I just don't want you to feel like these bastards are going to ever win.
Oh no, I'll fight forever. I mean, let's go.